wanna see good news. You don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip. So please don't miss weekly. Tune in to weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Tune in to weekly. Tune in check-in. Weekly check-in.
What has been going on with Black Lives Matter, right? Several months ago, it came out, or I think it was about 36 chapters. I might be incorrect, 34 to 36 chapters, but definitely between 30 to 40 chapters of Black Lives Matter across the country came out and said that, one, they disagreed with the self-appointed leader of Black Lives Matter, Colors, right? As appointing herself as over BLM. And secondly, they were like, where is all of this money that Black Lives Matter raised? We haven't gotten a cent. Like, we have been subsisting off of little to nothing. So that came out several months later. Speeded up to recently, the father of Michael Brown, and Michael Brown is, to me, one of the top two cases that defines Black Lives Matter. The first one is Trayvon Martin. The second one is Michael Brown, right? So Michael Brown, who was assassinated, killed by St. Louis, correct? Police, or Ferguson police. Ferguson police.
Outside of St. Louis, though, you're right.
Outside of St. Louis. Yeah, outside of St. Louis in 2014, in the summer of 2014. And so that launches, in my opinion, the very, very heavy anti-police, police brutality wave that we see that still subsists to now. Recently, Michael Brown's father asks that Black Lives Matter gives him $20 million. And so this is up for debate. I'm going to leave it at that, and I want to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Let me jump in on this.
Go ahead, Dane. Let
me jump in on this. So I don't know if you guys remember, but about 2 years ago, there was a bunch of those the presidents from the different small chapters in the cities kind of coming out saying, those people that's supposed to be over the Black Lives Matter, they're not funneling any of the funds to these neighborhoods. They're not funneling any of the funds when we have fundraisers here in local. They weren't taking care of the local precincts at all. And then fast forward to, I think it's terrible that you have raised all this money on the backs of these families, and these families haven't seen
these deaths.
Money. Yeah,
these
like the death. Yeah. You raised literally you raised all these tens of millions of dollars. And because what happened was, when the George Floyd thing happened, almost every corporate entity was utilizing Black Lives Matter as the people to funnel their donations and monies through. And I even said then, I was like, yo, they making a whole lot of money. Like when in the NBA, we donating a portion of tonight's to Black Lives Matter. Every 3-point made is going to be another 10,000 to Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, yo, they making a lot of bread. And what didn't match up to me was the amount of money that we're making and the amount of political capital they weren't using it for. You didn't see them coming out using those money for PACs. You didn't see them coming out using that money for the families of the people that they were supposed to be. And then you didn't even see them using that money to push a narrative in the media for themselves. Because if you have that much money, there should be a marketing strategy to show people how to get to Black Lives Matter, show people what Black Lives Matter is doing. And I went to a couple of Black Lives Matter rallies myself, and I saw some very, very interesting things. So some of the things,
for example,
so we were in LA, and this was really early on. It was me, my wife, and a few of my friends who, wanted to be a part of it. And the first thing was, they didn't say anything about the people who died, really. It was really about their agenda. And like, they brought up, for some reason, and I don't know why. And listen, I'm not against the LGBTQ community at all. But when you are talking about something specific as Black Lives Matter, why are all the main speakers talking about the LGBT community and their discrimination at these rallies? That's supposed to be
that has been one of the major criticisms is, and a lot of people are a lot of people don't want to publicly say it because there is such a strong push, in support of LGBTQ IA, right? But there are things that people have raised questions about that cannot get proper answers.
I mean, it disheartens me, but a part of me is happy. Because for all of us Black political scientists who kept saying, while you wagging your finger about the civil rights movement and how you don't need a hierarchical structure and why you don't need a sense of normalcy or a sense of formal institution, how that don't really get anything done and blah, 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 blah. All of us who said from the very beginning, we have nothing against what you're talking about. Well, there's some fundamental problems for us. Some of our fundamental problems are, who do we call when it's time for whatever else? How do you guys organize? Who's in control? When a movement starts growing this large, you got to have centralized leadership. You got to have a bank account. You got to have a place to start tracking this money. You need to then file a particular way with the federal government, either as a 501c3 or as a 501c4, so that you can then be seen as a super PAC. All of these questions that many Black political scientists, or a lot of those people that were connected to the struggle, have asked over and over and over again, we got shot down as not being supportive. We got shot down as being, we're the Uncle Toms now, right now, because we asking questions. We the Uncle Toms, and we are not really about the liberation of Black people and all these things. And so I know that my sister, why can't I remember her name? She's down there at UCLA, and now her name is escaping me. Melina, I can't forget Melina's last name.
It's a Muslim name.
Yes. Sis has been doing the work without any money. Right. And she's been one of the people big pushing these intertensions inside of the group. Right. Almost lost her job at UCLA over it. Right. By not only highlighting the tensions in the group, but pushing the Los Angeles PD. Right. She's one of the biggest reasons they have decided to reprogram a lot of those funds because of things that she pushed and did. Right. But she was one of the biggest ones also calling, right, for a formal organization. What does this mean? How do we organize ourselves? And people push back against her. So for me, I shouldn't say that I'm happy about the fact that they're being exposed in this way, but I'm frustrated because it always takes for the milk to be spilled for Black political scientists to be listened to. It always takes for then the demonizing of our ancestors. I'm not saying that we shouldn't critique them. I'm not saying they're above approach. I'm not saying they weren't sexist. I'm not saying they weren't homophobic. I'm not saying any of those things. But if you discount and discredit all of what they've done and in many ways reinvent the wheel because they were oh so bad, and then you find out it's not as easy as you think it is. This whole liberation thing, it's great in theory, but then when it comes to practice, there got to be some structural pieces. And one of the things that I felt like that the Black Lives Matter did that was to me diabolical to them was when the Congressional Black Caucus reached out to them about how they could help them legislatively. They had no propositions. They had no collective. Written up thesis. There was not enough buy-in. And because let me be careful, because somebody will say, well, we had this chapter may have had one, this chapter may have had one, and you may have, but there was no centralized place to go. And the Congressional Black Caucus, I know personally, reached out several times about how to get legislation and how to make these connections. Where we saw this be more successful was in Georgia, where they were far more organized, and there were other institutions, right? There was the Black Girls Vote initiative. There was all these other initiatives that got together around Black Lives principles, right? To then forward many of the things and to try to produce legislation. But my biggest argument has always been about Black Lives Matter, which goes to this thing about Michael Brown, and I'm gonna get to that really quickly. Michael Brown's father. My biggest push or my biggest pushback against them has always been, okay, so after you get into the streets, then what next? What do you want? How do I, with my scholarship, help you get to what you want? How do we use all the tools in the toolkit to help you get to what you want? And that is why this Michael Brown thing to me is so fascinating, because they can't really tell you where the money went. right? They can't tell you really where the money went besides in somebody's bank account. And legally, there's no reason that that money isn't that particular person's because of how they're legally organized, right? How they're structurally organized. If you're doing business as a DBA, but as a sole proprietor underneath this name, then Michael Brown's family doesn't have any right to that money. Now they can sue them for libel. I mean, there's some other creative things that we can do here to try to legally remedy this, but there's no really any legal recompense that's going to get Michael Brown's family or any other family for that matter any money because there's no structure to actually sue. Show me the incorporation papers. Show me how the national organization is organized. And that's one of the biggest reasons that Color stepped up to do what she did. Now, there's argument about if she should have done that or not, but that's why she stepped up to do it, because there is no formal organization. There is no centralized organization.
Dan, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, just to piggyback off of what she's saying, I think those are some of the biggest issues that they're going to have. And I also think this is one of those genies you can't put back in the bottle, because other people are going to start looking and start saying, you know what, my family didn't get no money either, and y'all been touting my dead loved one as a reason to raise this money. And just bigger than that, it's disappointing. It's disappointing when you have something like this that could be a good thing, that could be a great mechanism for people, and then you start to behave like the oppressor. It's just, it's really disappointing, and that's really all I have on it, and I hope they...
Dame, I don't even think they started acting like the oppressor. I think that to be honest with you, I think that their mindset about it was so abstract that they did not understand the confines in which they were functioning. And once the wheel got out of their hands, then they started acting like the oppressor, right? Once the wheel got out of their hands and they couldn't figure out, like you said to your point, how to put this genie back in the bottle, what do we do now to right these wrongs, right? Because let's just be very clear about this. And I think this is where I think people, again, and I don't want to highlight King or highlight Malcolm for being oh so great, but they understood the importance of strategy and structure, right? Strategy and structure. So this organization really started on a tweet, right? This started because because a tweet took off, and they were like, "Well, we got to harness this power, right? Because this tweet took off. This is not the Montgomery bus boycott where they planned it out. They knew who's gonna pick up who. They knew who's gonna go where, right? And that's why historically Black women have fought back and said, "Listen, we played a huge role in this movement, and don't get much credit for all of the things that we did to make this movement go, right?" So that's but it still doesn't sacrifice or stop the idea or eradicate the fact that they had structure and they had strategy. And that's what I think was missing here, which then leads you to act like the oppressor when you don't have it. Because when you don't have it, then you're trying to caress and corral power again. And then you have to act in a dominant way to be able to do that.
I just want to add, it's Melina Abdullah. That's her name.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah.
Yeah, and she's at Cal State, Los Angeles, not UCLA.
Yes, I'm sorry. She's at.
That's no problem. And I said Colors, or maybe I said McCullers, but Colors, Patrice Colors, right now, who's the self-appointed head of Black Lives Matter, who also struck a deal with Warner Brothers, some kind of production deal with Warner Brothers, and people who are on the ground are saying, how can you have a multi-million-dollar production deal, at Warner Brothers, and also had Black Lives Matter. I want to say to date, Black Lives Matter has incurred over either $1 or $2 billion of donation. In 2020 alone, BLM has raised 90 million of those dollars. So
now let's remember though, not all Colors didn't, or all of them didn't get that. Remember, there was a PAC that was set up that wasn't leading back to them that got money.
Right. Yeah, yes. And that's, I think, what Colors was trying to, kind of explain when she was on Roland Martin's show. And it goes to your point of saying it was this abstract idea based out of emotionality that was a hashtag that became out of their control, and they didn't know how to control it, right? And so what happens in any Black movement in the United States, it gets co-opted. Right. So the thing is that once you know and understand that it has been co-opted, what do? And this is the part, in my opinion, what you talk about, Sherise, is instead of saying it and re-pivoting, people began to just grab money and say, well, let me kind of get where I need to get and position myself, because struggle work is not easy. And you really struggle work in this country. This is the first time I've seen people walk out with some money, the way that people have walked out of it. So this is not an exaggeration. I want to say as well, another thing that becomes very tricky, and I think this leads to what Dame says, or kind of complements what Dame says in terms of it being disheartening. Now, corporations are putting, or they say they're putting money into these Black Lives Matter PACs or whatever. We don't know where the money is going. And it seems as if they are now on the right side of history. Mm-hmm. But what I think what we're finding out now, as things are beginning to unfold, is that they're really kind of cycling the dollar really back to them in a lot of ways. So what are your thoughts? That's just my opinion. 5 cent, 20 cent, 30 cent dollar. What's up?
Every dollar is always being cycled back to them. Mm-hmm. So to say that they're doing it in this fashion, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, they're always circulating their dollar back to them, right? We know based upon economics that the Black dollar doesn't stay in the Black community longer than 6 minutes, whereas the Asian dollar stays in the community for an entire week. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Black dollar stays in for 6 minutes. The Asian dollar stays in for an entire week. Why is that? It's because of this funneling. It's because that we are the top consuming producing. We have the top consuming producing activities, and what that means is either we're buying it, and if we're not buying it, then we're advocating buying it or encouraging it so that other people, based upon the fact it was on our bodies, go and buy it, right? And so because that is the way that the capitalism system is set up here in the United States. The idea that it's refunneling back, of course it's refunneling back. That to me is not the issue. The issue is, how do you get it to stay in your community longer? And that also, to me is the issue. Because you're not gonna stop it from coming out. The question is, how do you leave it instead of leaving it in there for 6 minutes, how do you leave it in there for a week? That to me is the question that we should be asking and we should be having a conversation about.
Yeah, and also I think and a bigger question to that too is, how do we keep our movements from being corporate and bastardized? Because I think that's one of the things that happened with Black Lives Matter. It went corporate, and once it went corporate, you seen the change in tone. You seen the change in, like, they lost their teeth. You know what I mean? Like the movement lost its teeth once you saw that we were going corporate. You saw the young ladies dressing nicer when they started making appearances on TV shows. You know, like I really watched, and even then they started having public beefs, like with them and D. Ray McKesson. Like it, you know, it's just, we went corporate, and I think lost sight of what Black Lives Matter was really supposed to be about. And like you said, Sherise, that could be, you know, some of it can be attributed to the fact that they weren't ready. They weren't ready for this amount of power. They weren't ready for this amount of money. They weren't ready for this amount of control. But I hope that at this point now that they can begin to try to fix it before it's too far gone, even though it might be too far gone already. But I think they still have a chance to make things right, because they are still making a lot of money hand over fist, to Kaia's points, and people are living really well based off the backs of Black Lives Matter.
But Dame, I guess my point to you is that to get the changes that they're talking about, it was going to be corporatized. You can't ask for the changes that they're asking for without it being corporatized. It's going to be co-opted. I guess that's my point. If you are struggling in a small community for access to water, right? That may get corporatized, that may not. When you are asking the United States of America, who has built its economic system off the backs of Black people, to change itself, it has built its capitalistic system off of slavery, by leased convict prisons, by now, re-incarcerating people so they can make money off these jails. You are asking to dismantle the entire system that has set up this country, and you don't think it's going to get co-opted or corporatized? You outside your mind if you haven't thought that far. You outside your mind if you don't think that that's possible, or that's what's going to happen. That is, I guess, the cry that all of us have been saying. All of us that are in Black politics have been, that's the point. That's our point is, if you're looking for the changes that you're looking for, know this is coming down the road. See what they did to King. See what they did to Malcolm. Be prepared for those things. And if they don't physically kill you, what are they going to do with this pen? What are they going to do with this money? What are they going to do to derail you? We know what's coming. We've seen this movie before.
But if the United States government can set up a system in which they give descendants of the Holocausts, if they give descendants of the Native Holocaust, they gave people who were in Manzanar social programs, then they can give us social programs.
But that's not what they were asking for, Kaya. They weren't clear about the ask.
I agree with that. But the thing is that, but to say that because capitalism, or we are in a capitalism system and there aren't any social programs in place in order to aid groups.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the corporate is feeding into the government. Right? There is this wheel that's turning like this, that's based upon capitalism. That's where you get your policies because of what business has done. It advocates for a certain set of policies, and the people oftentimes push back against that policy so that we can get a piece of the pie. That's what's turning. What I'm saying is that because you weren't clear about who you were asking, you were asking to be co-opted. If you were making your demand to the federal government about them providing reparations, then this would look different. I'm not saying it wouldn't be co-opted. I'm not saying it wouldn't have been influenced. I'm saying it would have been a different outcome because the objective would have been different. It would have been clear. I'm saying that the fact that you have obfuscated the point, you have allowed yourself to be vulnerable at so many entry points for co-optation. And corporate co-optation is the largest one because there is no check and balance. There is no shaming them into doing what's right. Whereas oftentimes the use of the federal government, you can shame them or push them to do certain different things. There's no ability to do that with a corporation that's then feeding the government to give it what it wants. That's what I'm saying. That is why, if you get, for a perfect example, that's why Stacey Abrams has said it's great that all these groups are hollering about these oppressive voter rights bills and everything that's happened at the state level. But until Coca-Cola, until Delta, until some of these big corporations that are right down here in Atlanta speak up, nothing's going to change until you guys open your mouth and stop feeding the Republican Party and other people in certain parties that want to encourage the repression of votes. This stuff is not going to change. You have to be clear about where you're working in the wheel. And that's what I'm saying to you, is that they were never clear about where they were working in the wheel. And so co-optation was inevitable.
So this is what I would say is that during Black History Month, Apple, I do know that for sure, their Apple Watch and LinkedIn used what we would call Black liberation colors for their logos and for their product. What group, other than our folk, the natives, who still there as native mascots, what other group do we know that will use their liberation colors in order to sell, to give back to the corporation, right? So my thing is that I agree with what you're saying. However, there's a caveat. Corporations know who they can exploit, how they can exploit, and feel as if they can do this without any serious consequence. My thing is, I'm pretty sure at the end, there was some Black person in their marketing that said, oh yeah, that's all right. So we have to fall in line. I think also we have to fall in line. And I think this is the part of the discussion in terms of how can Black Lives Matter make all of this money and it's not properly being funded, is that we don't, as you said, to fall in line, like as well. We're so scattered in a lot of ways that even when it comes to our advocacy and our protesting, when it looks like we're together, we really are not on the internal. So that's my little thoughts on it.
If you wanna see good news, you don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs.